If you haven't met me yet, my name's Kim Livingston Cobb. I'm the Associate Dean of Students here at UT Tyler. And areas that I supervise are the Student Counseling Center, our Center for Student Financial Wellness, our Center for Students in Recovery, our care program, and some of those kinds of things. So when our students have challenges, I may be one of the people that that you send your students to. And Dave is with me today. You want to introduce yourself, Dave?
My name is Dave Hill. I'm the Director of Student Conduct. I'm one of the other people who students get sent to sometimes. Kim and I have been working together on this for a pretty long time now, and we've found a lot of overlap between like behavior intervention, student conduct. We see a lot of the same things. So we're just hoping we can provide some additional, insight and ways to help students overcome some of the challenges they're facing.
Awesome. So, so we're going to focus mainly on our students who didn't have a great first semester here, and kind of how we encourage them, how we support them to keep going during this time. So what are some things that you guys have seen that have been major challenges for your students in their first semester on campus? Anybody think of any?
Okay. We had one student last semester who was a first on this campus, a couple of transfers. And this is pretty simple, but one of the challenges was they just didn't know where things were. And I don't know if it was because they couldn't find it on a map or we used too many acronyms, but it was, and also we have two FACs, That got kind of confusing. So I don't know if we can do any kind of just when we have any kind of virtual or real orientation, we can make sure that they know where places are.
Sure.
Cowan Center.
Yes, yes. And yeah, I think, too, this year has been so different. Because usually, they would have an in-person orientation where they get a campus tour and all that kind of stuff. And it's been a little different this year. Absolutely. So some of the things that that I'll talk about today are obviously academic. Everything from, we have high achieving students, and sometimes they maybe didn't get or didn't have to work very hard. And so they come here and they're not quite sure how to study or how to apply themselves at a deeper level or things like that. So sometimes the academic process and the expectations can be real challenges for students. Other things that we've seen a lot this year are financial challenges. Obviously, that's even more so this year with people losing jobs and things like that. So maybe there's some financial challenges with their parents, but maybe also there's, sometimes you're a first semester student and the first time out on your own, and you get this financial aid check, or money in your account, and you haven't really thought about how to budget and make that last all semester. And so, sometimes it's, oh, okay, well, I just wasted this money on whatever because, it was there. And so learning how to manage their finances and things like that can be a challenge. Relationships are always kind of one of those. Some students come to campus and they feel like they fit in, they're real extroverted, they get involved, and, you know, make friends easy. Then you have other students that it's not so easy to make new friends in a place where you've never been. And then of course this year, when, you know, a lot of stuff is online and you don't have some of those same opportunities, you know, there can be a sense of loneliness and challenge with trying to just develop relationships. You know, also there are times when relationships are not healthy. And, you know, so students are facing some of those issues that can really cause a lot of stress. Stress in and of itself, and really change in and of itself creates stress in all of our lives. And so this has definitely been a year of change. But, you know, for our first semester students, this is a big change, and, you know, learning to manage time, to, you know, balance the academics and extracurricular and maybe working and social and all of those kinds of things can be a real challenge in figuring out how to balance those things. And then we have students who have conduct issues. And, you know, a couple different reasons, you know, some students, it'll be an issue of alcohol or other drugs. But this year with the pandemic, we've also seen a lot of issues of, you know, just not wanting to socially distant, you know, things like students not, you know, not having, or our campus policy, our students living on campus, they can't have guests in their rooms. And that's to really help us to manage the COVID spread. And so, you know, some of them are taking that seriously and some of them didn't take that so seriously. And they were kind of dealing with some conduct charges. And so that can feel like a big hurdle and a big challenge to overcome. And then mental health, you know, in every year we see students that, you know, this is kind of the time when some mental health concerns might start coming up in someone's life. You know, also our students come to us with mental health concerns. And so, you know, sometimes, you know, freshmen coming in or new students coming in, you know, this may either be the first time that they've dealt with a mental health challenge, or maybe they have been on medication for a while and they decide, you know, I'm on my own and I don't need that medication anymore, or, you know, or other things like that. So a big challenge that we've seen, I think even more so this year, has been mental health concerns with our students. And then of course, everything I've kind of talked about, you know, with pandemic, but just like all of us, you know, our new students are, you know, facing this time of a lot of stress and grief. And if you really think about, you know, our freshmen this year have kind of missed out on a lot of things. You know, they missed out on the last part of their senior year, which is supposed to be such a fun time. They've missed out on, you know, kind of what you would expect to be, you know, your typical freshman on campus experience. You know, some freshmen had to have all of their classes online, and that wasn't what they anticipated, you know, things like that. So there can be a grief to that, a grief to kind of that not being able to have the experiences that you anticipated, as well as the grief of loss. We've had several students, multiple students who have lost family members, who have lost friends for one reason or another. And that grief is really challenging to get through and to continue to focus and move forward when they're dealing with that. So if you live in Texas, and of course, you know, the snow that we got recently, you know, sometimes we think about building a snowman whenever we do get our snow ice. And, you know, our reality often doesn't match our expectations. And it can be the same way with a student coming to college for the first time. Um, I will do presentations with our students that are on academic probation after their first semester. And, you know, I like to ask the question, how have your expectations of the college experience matched up with reality? Well, this year, it's really different. You know, the reality of what you anticipate to be your typical, you know, first semester college experience is not what we have because of the pandemic this year, and we have a lot of people working really hard to make it as good as we can, but there's some difference in expectations and reality. Expectations in the, you know, level of challenge, maybe some things like that. So, you know, often when we're working with students, you know, they kind of come in with a certain expectation, and when it doesn't match that expectation, then sometimes they feel like, well, maybe I don't fit in, you know, maybe I'm not right, or things like that. A few years ago, when my son started college for the first time, one day in the summer before he started, he made the comment, you know, I'm just really afraid that it's not going to match up to my expectation. And of course, I've been working on these resiliency things for a while and everything. And I looked at him and said, it's not going to match up to your expectation, because, you know, you go visit a school and you get the shiny, pretty, perfect, you know, and you meet the students who maybe are paid to, you know, meet potential students, and they're totally focused on you, and, you know, and all of those kinds of things. And not that that's a bad thing at all, just that, you know, often when we come into the environment, the expectation doesn't match. Maybe it's harder for me to make friends than I thought it would be when I got there, you know, or, you know, I have some academic challenges or whatever. And so, you know, just kind of that, that difference can make it really challenging for students. So I really like Carol Dweck and some of the research that she's done. But she says, for decades, I've been studying why some people succeed while people who are equally talented did not. And over the years, I've discovered that people's mindsets play a crucial role in this process. And so I'm going to talk some about mindset and how that really can relate to our ability to be resilient. And so she identifies two different types of mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and the growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you believe that skills are innate. You know, this is my, you know, skill level. This is my intelligence level. This is who I am. Where in a growth mindset, the belief is that skills are built. So it's, you know, it's more about, you know, I may not be there yet, but I'm working towards it and learning and growing. In a fixed mindset, my focus is on performance. It's on the outcome of this. It also is kind of on image of, okay, well, if I don't do well in that, people are going to think badly of me, or, you know, some of those kinds of things. Where in a growth mindset, the focus really is on the process, you know, the growth, the improvement, and focus on how we get better. In a fixed mindset, effort is seen as either not necessary, or, you know, if I have to try so hard, it means I'm not good enough. And so it, you know, it kind of comes back to this is where I am today is what I think I always will be. And in a growth mindset, you know, the effort is useful because I believe that, you know, I can build these skills. You know, the effort leads to, growth. They see it as an important part of learning when it's challenging. And so in a fixed mindset challenges, those things that are hard for us, we tend to back down from that and avoid it. Because again, if it, goes back to that, threat of not looking good, that threat of, okay, if I have this big challenge and I find out that I can't do it, then there's this thing that's wrong with me. Whereas when you have a growth mindset and you see challenge, it's about, this is an opportunity for me and I get to learn from it and I get to grow. And so I embrace that challenge and I persevere. Even when it's hard, I'm like, okay, but I'm learning from this. In a fixed mindset, if I make a mistake, I get really discouraged. I get worked up. I want to avoid mistakes at all cost. And so that can put a lot of pressure on you, if you feel like you have to be perfect. Whereas with a growth mindset, my mistakes are a learning opportunity. So yes, I messed up on this, but how do I do it better next time? And then in a fixed mindset, when I receive feedback on something, I'm kind of defensive. I take it personally, again, because I see my mistake, or I see not being there right now as something that means I am bad, or I can't get there. And in a growth mindset, feedback is appreciative because, hey, I can use this to learn. It makes a big difference in that.
A lot of our students have a hard time differentiating between the two, and a lot of them don't. A lot of them are more resilient than they realize, but they don't know what it looks like. And several years ago, I had a student who illustrates the difference between these two mindsets really well. She was a nursing major, and she asked to come up and talk to me, and she just started falling apart. She had just failed the first exam in a really important class. And just the longer she talked about it, the worse it got. She was, she didn't understand it. She was never going to understand it. She was going to fail the class. She was going to fail the program. She wasn't going to be a nurse. And so I reached out to some of my former students who were now practicing nurses. And when I told them what was happening, they all laughed. And they said that the class she was in was one of the absolute hardest classes the program had. And so one of them sat down with her, and I mean, this student was a brilliant student and was more proud of the C she got in that class than any A she'd ever earned. Well, once my student understood it wasn't hard because she couldn't do it, it was hard because it's hard. And she buckled down. She made a couple of adjustments to how she was approaching it, and she wound up passing the class first time through. Her prof took her aside and said she'd had the biggest turnaround she'd ever seen in the class. And so I checked on her next semester when she was taking the other worst class that they offered. And every time I checked in on her, I'd ask her how she was doing, and she'd always say, "It's tough, but I can do it." So a lot of times sometimes they just need someone to remind them what they can do.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, one of her issues, I think, was she didn't see anybody else freaking out over it. And what was happening is they had freaked out over other classes, or they were really good at hiding it. And she thought she was the only one who wasn't getting it. That wasn't even close to the truth.
And we see a lot of nursing students in counseling who have been really good at hiding it. And a lot of kind of that imposter syndrome, of everybody else. I know that everybody else is doing great, and I'm just, struggling along. And then, but I like to educate them and say, I've actually talked to, 2 other nursing students today who feel the exact same way that you feel, and you're not alone in this, and things like that. And that can make a big difference. So, when you look at something with that growth mindset, it can make a big difference in how successful you are.
And we're not picking on the nursing program. They, among other things, it's a demanding program, but the nursing faculty are also really good at referring their students
Yes,
to counseling, to other resources.
absolutely. So, resiliency. I love this picture of the tree that's been cut down and then it's growing again. That to me is such a great symbol of resiliency. And we all have had times in our lives when we've probably felt like this tree that's been cut down, and we've had to learn to grow and maybe grow in a different way. And so, I usually tell students, if you haven't experienced failure or major challenge or, anything like that yet, you will at some time in your life face that. And, sometimes it's like, this is somewhat of a good time, to face it and learn how to keep going. And so, sometimes it really is about learning the coping skills and learning how to move forward, even when we're faced with a lot of those odds. When I talk to our students on probation, I like Dory, and they still now remember Finding Nemo, so I haven't quite gotten to a generation that doesn't remember Nemo, but and I usually title my presentation "Just Keep Swimming," but that, just that challenge of, most of us as we're older have experienced those times in our lives when we just have to keep swimming, and we have to figure out how to move forward. So when we're talking with whether it's a freshman or any other student who has faced a failure, a major challenge, something like that, some of the messages that we want to talk about are, one, distress happens when, the reality doesn't match our expectations, and so recognizing that sometimes our expectations are not really realistic, so that reality doesn't match, and that causes us some distress. But the other thing to say is, stress, setbacks, failures, challenges, it's to be expected in life. You can predict that at some point in your life, you're gonna face some stuff. And that doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't make you weird or weak or whatever, any of those terms that, people tend to beat themselves up over. But it really is a predictable and expected part of life. And I think, a reminder to our students and to us, our high achieving students also struggle. We don't have students that come in and, are high achieving and just because I've always been successful, then I'm always going to be successful. Our high achieving students also struggle. And, when I've talked with some other people, they've said, sometimes they struggle even more because maybe they have such high expectations of themselves that the anxiety can kind of kick in. If you feel like you have to be perfect, and if you feel like you can't ever make a mistake, that can create a lot of stress and anxiety, which kind of, makes things worse for you. So our high achieving students also struggle. And their success depends on learning how to manage the stress, the distress, the failures, all of those kinds of things. And so, you know, that the whole process of learning happens because we've been faced with these things. And so in order for us to be successful, it's an active thing that we have to do to learn that. And as you guys know, early intervention is the most effective. Sometimes students, I hear so often, you know, will get to the end of the semester because they've just told themselves, you know, I'm you know, I'm giving up if I'm asking for help, or I'm not good enough if I'm asking for help, or, you know, or whatever. And so if our students would tell us the beginning of the semester when they're facing a challenge, and we can walk beside them and help them to learn and grow, it's so much easier to make that up than, you know, if I wait till finals week and then tell my faculty, you know, I've been struggling with this all semester, and, you know, can I have some extra credit or something, or whatever. So letting students know that the early intervention, we can do so much more for you if you let us know early on. And that's what we're here for. The fact that it isn't accomplished alone, I think, is also a really important message for our students. You know, I try to tell students that, you know, if they were the only ones that were struggling with this, we wouldn't have the resources that we have. You know, we have a lot of great resources on campus for our students. And, you know, and I, you know, to say that it would be, to say that it's unusual for students to experience this kind of thing, well, we wouldn't be putting money as a university into a resource if it doesn't make a difference to quite a few students, right? So, so know that because we're here, and, you know, because the university has decided to fund us, that should tell them that their problem is not unique. You know, that this is something that a lot of people experience, and we're here, we have jobs, you know, to help you. And you know, and so I think it's important that they know that they don't have to do this alone. It's not about, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, and moving on and doing everything alone. It really is about, you know, find those resources, you know, let us help you. You know, a success with help is no less of a success. And so really, you know, encouraging them to take advantage of those resources. You know, I also talk to students and that come to counseling maybe for the first time, and they almost feel guilty for, you know, coming to counseling and wasting resources. And, you know, and we're like, you know, you're not wasting anything, that's why we're here, you know. And so just kind of letting them know that you know, it's not weak, it's not unusual, it's none of those things to take advantage of resources.
I had one example, one issue that I'm seeing a lot is students, they'll be in some situations and they don't think there's any help. They don't think that it's going to get better, that it can get better. And I had a student just probably within the last month or so that, I mean, for like an hour and a half was just telling me all this stuff that they had going on. And it was, I mean, it was some legitimate stuff this person was dealing with. And so I kind of walked them through what some of the options were. And, you know, I said, you know, counseling can really help in this. And the students said, oh, I couldn't do that. I can't disclose what's going on. And I kind of looked at him and said, think what you've been doing the last hour and a half. And oh, well, I guess. And a lot of times though, they feel so trapped that they don't, and you know, it's not, a lot of it's stuff that people don't really talk about, and they don't recognize that other people are getting help for it. So it can be a real challenge, but I have seen, you know, student after student after student do so much better once they start getting help for those issues. And a lot of students come here already with plenty of issues. A lot of the students that are disclosing things to me, some horrible things that have happened to them, but a lot of the time it's not stuff that happened here. It happened before they, were even admitted sometimes.
So one of the things that I've always appreciated about Dave's office and the things that Dave does is his ability to, like he said, get students to open up to him. And, he makes a lot of referrals to counseling. He walks a lot of students over to counseling after they've had a conduct meeting. So Dave, tell them a little bit about how you do that.
Okay. We noticed some years ago, my coordinator and I we noticed the things that we were seeing, that a student would come in because they had a six-pack in the fridge, and they would just start talking, and we could recognize some things in their body language, and we'd start just kind of asking some slightly more probing questions. And I've tracked it the last 2 years. I'm getting big disclosures on an average of once or twice a week. That's stuff that warrants a trip to the counseling center. So one of the things I just started doing, I've got a standard set of questions I ask students when they go through the conduct process that I modify depending on what their specific case is. But 2 questions I always ask. I will always, when we're starting to wrap up, I'll say, okay, so, we're going through the conduct process. How are you doing? How are you holding up? And we'll kind of talk about how they're feeling and what's going on. And sometimes other things will come out, but just in case they don't, the second question I always ask is, so aside from this, is there anything else going on that you've been stressing over, that's been eating at you, anything else you want to talk about? And those 2 questions, sometimes students will start telling us these things because we're the first ones that asked. And it helps that, they come in, we've got a bunch of time blocked off. They have to start off telling me something that's kind of awkward and they don't want to talk about anyway. But when that goes well, that kind of primes the pump. And if I, if I receive what they tell me well, they're more likely to disclose again. Communication theory talks a lot about reciprocity. But also, if someone discloses, that's kind of a nerve-wracking thing to do. And if the other person receives it well, that makes it easier to disclose again. So this week alone, I've had 3 major issues. I had one student come in for a drug case and just told me everything about the stress they're under, the financial issues if they can't finish on time, challenges, grief that they're going through from some recent losses. Second student comes in, also a drug case, dealing with massive anxiety, again, grief, PTSD. Both of these I'm referring over to the counseling center. I had a third student came in and she had to report about a sexual assault that she went through. And the stuff that comes out from these, like I said, my 2 drug cases were real open and shut. I mean, there was no question what was going on, but everything else started coming out. One of those students was in here for north of 2 hours just because of all the other stuff that they were having to deal with. And keep in mind, I don't have a ton of specialized training. I had 6 hours of graduate level counseling classes over 25 years ago. So, I'm kind of rusty on the training part. But if you have those opportunities, if you can tell something's a little off, just being able to ask those questions can elicit a lot. Now, one of the challenges is if you knock on those doors, you've got to be prepared for what's on the other side. And, I have had situations where I was completely caught off guard, but I'm very good at not freaking out over it. And I could talk about some horribly personal, horrible things, almost like we're talking about the weather. And when they see I don't freak out over it, that makes it safer to talk about. So one of the things, and like Kim just put this up, make sure you're aware of the resources we have available. Counseling Center is real high on that list. If there's other stuff beyond mental health type issues, the care team or the dean of students office, either or both of those can get the students plugged into a lot of other stuff. We've had students dealing with food insecurity, with homelessness, financial challenges, advising issues. And a lot of those issues are things that we can help fix, or at least get them some help to where they can address it on their own. Do make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because a lot of times it's going to be pretty simple stuff. You know, I hear a lot of depression, anxiety. I hear a lot of homesickness. But I have had way more conversations than I care to think about some horrible abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of dark things. Make sure you're taking care of yourself if you get those. Make sure, Kim also posted up here on following up. I had some Title IX cases several years ago, and I just got in the habit when I was working on their cases just to send them a message, you know, an email or a text or whatever we worked at the time, just to update them on their case. And after that, I just kept doing it, just basically sending them a message, just to say, hey, just want to check in, see how things are going. You know, I'm proud of you. If there's anything I can do, just give me a holler. And at one point I got worried that maybe I was being too invasive doing that. And when I asked these two students about it, they wouldn't even let me finish the question. They said that even though they didn't always respond, just getting those messages, sometimes they'd be in a real dark spot, and just getting a message from someone else who knows their name helped. It helped remind them that it's not always going to be that dark. But sometimes just that follow-up, one, it can help make sure that they are getting plugged in, or if something doesn't quite work out, that we can find other resources. But just having someone else who knows their name and who reaches out to them I have been blown away at the impact that doing something as simple as that has on our students.
Yeah. And, if you refer a student to counseling, obviously we're confidential and we can't tell you if they came or didn't come or whatever. But you can follow up with a student, and kind of go, well, how did it go? Is there anything else that, I can help you find or do or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with you asking the student, how it went or how they're doing. This kind of the little, you're more than your failure, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. When you're talking to student, what are the benefits to your failure? And sometimes that's, that can be hard to come up with, but what are some things you've learned? Are there some things maybe that you've learned that you wouldn't have learned otherwise? And recognize those. Celebrating those little things, those little successes can be really helpful, especially when, you're really overwhelmed. For me, a few years ago, I had lost my husband and was really struggling with grief and everything. And I learned to celebrate the little things. Today I got out of bed, today I did the dishes, or whatever. But learning to celebrate the little things can make such a huge difference. And, you kind of need those things that you can kind of, pat yourself on the back and go, okay, with everything that's going on, I was able to do this, and so sometimes it's really helpful to put things like that in perspective. what is the truth? You know, so sometimes when maybe you fail at something, or, you know, something is overwhelming or whatever, it's important to kind of think about what we're saying to ourselves about it. Even the wording we use sometimes can make a difference. You know, if I'm thinking about something and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was just so awful. It's, you know, it's just end of the world type stuff. And, you know, maybe I made a mistake on a presentation or whatever. And, you know, if I'm like, oh, you know, it's just horrible that I did that, instead of, you know, okay, I messed up. I didn't want to do that, you know, but I'm going to get through it. I'm going to, you know, learn from it, things like that. So sometimes it's even just our semantics, you know, what words are we using to ourselves about a certain situation. Self-compassion, you know, so often we beat ourselves up. And I will often ask people, okay, so say a friend, or say your best friend was going through exactly what you're going through. What would you say to them? You know, would you be, you know, putting them down and condemning them and, you know, and beating up on them the way you beat up on yourself? Probably not. If you tend to be that type of person, you probably don't have a lot of friends, you know, but think about, you know, what would you say to a friend or someone you love who's going through exactly the same thing? And often that, you know, it really is about having some self-compassion, you know, and figuring out, you know, how do we take care of ourselves? And then again, that whole thing of, you know, you're not alone in this. You are not the only one who has gone through this. You know, there are lots of other people who have experienced this, and you don't have to do it alone. One, you're not alone in what you're going through, but at the same time, you're not alone because, you know, we have some great people here on campus. You know, even if they don't have the friend group or they don't have the family support, they don't have to be alone. You know, we have a lot of faculty and staff who are here because we care, you know, and, you know, our jobs and our roles here at the university, we do them because we care about students, you know, and we don't want them to be alone. And so letting them know that is really important. So I have this little video that I want to show you. And there'll be parts of it I'll just kind of skip through because I don't want you to have to watch the whole thing. But oh.
Hi everyone. Gosh, I wish I could dance.
Can y'all see that?
And you really don't want me to. So instead, I thought I would talk a little today about how people think. I'm fascinated by this question. I'm a social psychologist, which basically means I'm a professional people watcher. So this is what I do. I try to figure out how humans think and how we might be able to think better. And here's something I noticed a few years ago about how I seem to think. Here's a typical week in my life, which usually seems to revolve entirely around publishing papers. So here I am in the maximum of my artistic abilities as a stick figure, going along at baseline, and a paper gets accepted. I get this rush, this blip of happiness, and then I'm back to baseline by about lunchtime. A few days later, a paper might get rejected, and that feels pretty awful. And I wait for that blip to end, but somehow I just can't stop thinking about it. And here's the craziest part. Even if another paper gets accepted the next day, well, that's nice, but somehow I can't get that pesky rejection out of my head. So what is going on here? Why does a failure seem to stick in our minds so much longer than a success? Well, together with my colleague Amber Boydston in the political science department, I started thinking about this question of, do our minds get stuck in the negatives? We all know intuitively that there are different ways of thinking about things. The same glass, the saying goes, can be seen as half full or half empty. And there's a lot of research in the social sciences showing that depending on how you describe the glass to people, as half full or half empty, it changes how they feel about it. So if you describe the glass as half full, this is called a gain frame because you're focusing on what's gained, then people like it. But if you describe the same glass as half empty, a loss frame, then people don't like it. But we wondered, what happens when you try to switch from thinking about it one way to thinking about it another way? Can people shift back and forth, or do they get stuck in one way of thinking about it? Does one of these labels, in other words, tend to stick more in the mind? Well, to investigate this question, we conducted a simple experiment. We told participants in our experiment about a new surgical procedure, and we randomly assigned them to one of two conditions. For participants in the first condition, the first group, we described the surgical procedure in terms of gains. We said it had a 70% success rate. And for participants in the second group, we described the procedure in terms of losses. We said it had a 30% failure rate. So it's the exact same procedure. We're just focusing people's attention on the part of the glass that's full or the part of the glass that's empty. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people like the procedure when it's described as having a 70% success rate, and they don't like it when it's described as having a 30% failure rate. But then we added a twist. We told participants in the first group, you know, you could think of this as a 30% failure rate. And now they don't like it anymore. They've changed their minds. And we told participants in the second group, you know, you could think of this as a 70% success rate, but unlike the first group, they stuck with their initial opinion. They seem to be stuck in the initial loss frame that they saw at the beginning of the study. We conducted another experiment. This time we told participants,
I'm going to fast forward through some of the other experiments, but if you get a chance to ever watch it, it's really interesting. Go to
on a more personal level, what this research means to me is that you have to work to see the upside. Literally, this takes work. This takes effort. And you can practice this. You can train your mind to do this better. There's research out of UC Davis showing that just writing for a few minutes each day about things that you're grateful for can dramatically boost your happiness and well-being and even your health. We can also rehearse good news and share it with others. We tend to think, right, that misery loves company, that venting will help get rid of our negative emotions, that we'll feel better if we just talk about how terrible our day was. And so we talk, and we talk, and we talk about the boss who's driving us crazy, and the friend who never called us back, and the meeting at work where every little thing that could go wrong did. But we forget to talk about the good stuff. And yet that's exactly where our minds need the most practice. So my husband, who has this disconcerting habit of listening to what I say other people should do and then pointing out that technically speaking, I'm a person too, has taken to listening to me for about 2 minutes on days when I come home all grumpy and complaining about everything. And he listens and he says, okay, but what happened today that was good? So I tell him about the student who came up to me after class with this really interesting, insightful question. And I tell him about the friend who emailed me out of the blue this morning just to say hello. And somewhere in the telling, I start to smile. And I start to think that maybe my day was pretty decent after all. I think we can also work in our communities to focus on the upside. We can be more aware that bad tends to stick. One mean comment can stick with somebody all day, all week even. And bad tends to propagate itself, right? Somebody snaps at you and you snap back and you snap at the next guy too. But what if the next time somebody snapped at you, you forgave them? What if the next time you had a really grumpy waitress, you left her an extra large tip? Our minds may be built to look for negative information and to hold on to it. But we can also retrain our minds if we put some effort into it and start to see that the glass may be a little more full than we initially thought. Thank you.
I'm gonna post that to you
for just
guys.
$67. You can.
Okay. So what did y'all think about that? Students actually respond pretty well when I show them that video, and it kind of gives them something, a little bit to think about. Yes, it takes work, to have that growth mindset, to think of, not get stuck in the negatives, to focus on, the positives and on growth and stuff like that. It does take a little work, but you can learn to do that, and it can be really, really helpful in your success. So this is a faculty staff kind of chart that we've done through our care team, and you can find it on the web under, I believe it's under the student conduct and intervention page. And so this just kind of talks about, the recognizing, challenges for students or some behaviors and things like that, that may be something that, and how you want to handle them. When might you refer to counseling? When might you refer to the care team? And things like that. So, so you can find that online, and it can be helpful. And of course, whether it's a low level or a high level, you can always file a care team report, because, we will respond to it, whatever level it's at, and help you with that too, and consult with you as well.
We would much rather you file a report and it turns out that it's really nothing that's actionable at that point, than you not file the report when there's something serious going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we would much rather deal with that than the other. And sometimes there's, it may look minor, but other people may have already reported other things, and that extra bit of information may make the difference. So do not, if you're ever questioned whether you should, feel free to give us a call beforehand. But there's never a bad time to report, pretty much.
Absolutely. So some of the resources here on campus, obviously we've been talking about the counseling center a lot today. Just so you know, it's free for students. They've already paid for it through their student service fees. It is confidential. We do have licensed professionals on campus. We often will have an opportunity for a same-day appointment, especially if there is a crisis involved. So let us know if you're sending a student to us and you feel like this is a same day, we really got to get this person in. You can always call me and let me know. We can rearrange some schedules if people's schedules are full, and we'll make sure that we get them seen. Students are also able to schedule appointments online now through our website, so that's been really helpful for our students too. We also have our Center for Student Financial Wellness. If your student is struggling financially and might need some assistance in that area, then we can help them there. And we have our Center for Students in Recovery for students who might be struggling with substance abuse. And so we have this crisis hotline. It is available 24 hours, 7 days a week, even on holidays. So this is a great thing to let your students know about. We get calls from the students themselves. We get calls from a friend who is calling, about a friend that they're really worried about, or, I've had calls on the crisis line from a faculty. And so yeah, we can, it's a great resource. Okay, and finally, I guess that was the end of the show. Hold on. So, this is my contact information, and I'm always happy to help. I'm going to stop sharing that, see if we have any questions or comments. Yes, if you guys would like me to send you the PowerPoint or something like that, I can do that. Okay, so I'll just I'll plan on sending it to you guys. And then if anyone else maybe is watching this later that's recorded, feel free to send me an email and I can get the information to you too. I'm going to make a note of who all is on here. And does anybody have any questions or anything like that that they would like? All right.
Hi, I have one quick question.
Yes.
Stephanie Yurdy here.
Hi.
So I missed the first couple of minutes of the presentation, so you may have mentioned this,
Uh-huh.
but I'm a fairly new instructor.
Mhm.
What if I notice a student is starting to struggle and I'm not really sure what to do? What should my first action be?
I think recognizing it. So I would, I wouldn't do it, okay, end of the class and, a lot of people are around, those kinds of things. But, whether it's phone or Zoom or in person, and just kind of go, hey, I noticed that, you're struggling a little bit. Is there anything I can help with?
Okay.
And they may or may not respond to you, but, kind of just opening that door. And just kind of saying, we've got lots of resources here on campus. If there's ever a time that, you need assistance, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just want to add to that as well. Hi, everyone. Also, there's a new, it's fairly new resource called Patriot Strong. And that has really helped a lot of students. And it helps them with a variety of stuff. It's not just maybe mental health, but maybe financial issues, maybe academic issues. And it puts the student in contact with the right person to help them figure out their particular issue. So if you're not aware of that, it is Patriot Strong. And it comprises of counseling center, financial aid office, registrar's office, pretty much every department has some hand into that. So go with what Ms. Livingston Cobb said. Recognizing is one of the biggest things first, and then once you recognize it, then if you feel comfortable, I've had a student who came in one of my classes, and he was habitually late. He was always late, and when he would come into class, he would have a odor that's not becoming of taking a bath, or the odor was more so plant-based. If I can, he smelled like weed. Smell like that, yeah. He smelled like weed. So I noticed that every time he would come in class, he would have that odor on him, and I didn't know how to approach it at first, and then I kind of had to calm down, because first I took it personal that he was coming to class one in this particular mindset, as we discussed earlier. So what I decided to do was, after class was over, I said, can I talk to you after class? And I said, hey, I wasn't always a professor. You have a weed smell about you when you come into class. The first thing he said was, oh, you can smell that? I was like, yeah. What do it's all in your clothes. The first thing he did was, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to. I just said, look, what you do outside of class is you're grown, you do it outside of class. I said, but respect the class and respect your classmates. I said, now, if you start to do this, if you continue this, then I may need to refer you to counseling or someone to kind of help you, kind of control yourself and all that. So I think that helped him a lot. And he recognized that he was interrupting class and all that. And I want to share one more thing is about the early intervention. In my face-to-face class, I tell students, let me know ahead of time. If something's wrong or if something's taking place, let me know ahead of time so that I can provide the resources that you would need to overcome that. Don't wait to the day of the final exam to say, Dr. Lawrence, I had a flat tire 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I can't help you the day of the exam about a flat tire that took place 2 weeks ago. I said, if you give me a heads up, give me time to help you. And I think a lot of my students are really, really receptive when I say that to them, because it makes them feel like, okay, I can come to him and say, hey, I have an issue with my mom or my dad, and he's willing to work it out with me. And I've had a lot of students that they say, Dr. Lawrence, I really appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll get emails that say, thank you for this. I'm having issues with this. And I respond back to them. First and foremost, thank you for letting me know the issue. If you need additional assistance, let me know and I can direct you to the person to talk to, and we can move forward from there. So thank you.
Dr. Lawrence, to kind of follow up with, as crazy as things are right now, with the enforced distancing and, just things happen so quickly. Like, my admin just got a call yesterday. Her daughter's entire class was exposed. And so now she's having to work from home.
Wow.
With all the pressure from the pandemic and everything else that's going on right now, offering that at the beginning, just, hey, we know things happen. If
Yes.
you're going through something, let us know sooner rather than later. Giving students permission, that basically gives students permission to ask when there's something going on.
Yes.
And that is so much easier to help work on things on the front end than on the back end.
Yes, sir.
Hey, can I ask a question about that? I kind of do the same thing, but it seems like the last couple of semesters, because students are so stressed, some are doing fine, they get the work done, they meet their deadlines, and others just don't. And then they pour out their heart that they're going through this stuff. And, I'm compassionate, but talk to me about grading. What type of leniency or what type of, they're still not getting the work done, or they're still not, do you give them a huge break, or do you extend a deadline just for them? What's been your sense? What's worked?
What I do is, if it's a student that's never been in my class before, this is the first time they're in my class, and I notice that they may have issues and they tell me ahead of time, I kind of monitor their grades, their work assignments when they're turning things in. And then I'll say, okay, look, I'll give you this one-time extension. But I'm mindful of that. I'm real mindful because I've had students that have come to me and they've told me that they lost their grandmother 5 times. I was like, no, you legally, you only have 2 biological grandmothers. I don't know how you have 5. So I do monitor their grades and their points that I'm giving them. And a lot of students, they appreciate that leniency or that extension, and they won't abuse it. They'll be like, you know what, he's giving me this one-time opportunity. I'm very thankful for that. I'm going to use that one time, and that's one time only. Now, if I have those students that are going to abuse it, I do pay attention, and I tell them, look, this is your 3rd or 4th time submitting the assignments, past the deadline. I've given you one extension. I'm going to start deducting points. Now that does take a little bit on work on your end, to kind of pay more attention to that particular student. But you be able, for me, I can pick up on the student if they're not going to do well in the class. I can say, okay, look, I right now the first assignment was due, and you already sent me an email saying you won't be able to submit it. That's an alarm for me to kind of pay attention to that particular student to say, okay, I need to kind of watch him or her as they progress throughout the semester. So I do put it in my syllabus that, I don't accept late assignments except for extenuating circumstances, but I need to know that ahead of time. I know things happen, life happens, and I'm okay with that. But don't abuse the I'm going to extend this assignment for you case. So hope that answered your question. That's for me.
That helps
Thank
a lot. That's almost exactly what I do and have done, but I felt kind of guilty about saying no late assignments and then okay, you can have one, but don't tell anybody, you know.
Well, and also remember that incompletes and medical withdrawals are a thing. And sometimes, sometimes really the best thing for the student is to bite the bullet, do the medical withdrawal because they have to get these medical issues dealt with. And sometimes incompletes, yeah, it can be a challenge, but giving that time to address whatever those immediate issues are is gonna, even with the challenge of making the work up, that's gonna be more doable than trying to power through dealing with the traumas or whatever it is that they're facing. I am gonna have to run. I've got a student that I'm supposed to meet with shortly. Before I go though, does anyone have any questions that I can answer or anything specific to what I addressed?
Thanks, Dave.
Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.